One of the stories that is trending right now, though, Elon Musk terminating that $44 billion deal to buy Twitter. I want to bring in legal analyst Seth Berenzweig. Seth, thanks so much for being with us. We're seeing that there's going to be a little bit of pushback from Twitter on this. They're saying not so fast. We want to continue with this deal. Where do you see the legal battles going with this?
Well, I think that Elon Musk got himself caught in a hornet's nest. He did not handle this correctly, and I believe that literally within the next couple of days, he will find himself as a defendant in a breach of contract action in the Chancery Court in Delaware. As has been noted, the chairman of the board of Twitter has issued within the hour a notification that they're going to be holding him to the deal. They're not going to accept the breakup fee. And it's a pretty significant breakup fee, but relative to the overall $44 billion value at the quoted price, it's insignificant. Twitter's up against the wall. They are going to fight back. And I think that when they file this lawsuit, and I can tell you it's coming in a couple of days, I think that Elon Musk, for several reasons, is going to have an uphill battle. He will not be a sympathetic defendant in this upcoming court action.
So we know that there is going to be legal action taken on this. You know, how much money do you think is going to be invested? This is a $44 billion deal. You would think that that $1 billion breakup fee would be sufficient for Twitter, but they're saying no. How much could go into this?
$1 billion.
Well, in terms of the litigation budget, I think it's going to be in the tens of millions of dollars. You have two big war chests here. Ironically, it's pretty clear to me that the war chest that Elon Musk has is going to be even bigger than the corporations, because he had the excuse to sell billions of dollars of stock in Tesla under the imprimatur of saying that he needed to collect capital for the deal. So, you know, he could, first of all, he could pay the breakup fee without breaking a sweat, but that's not going to be good enough for the company, because they want to have what's called specific performance on this deal that's worth $44 billion. So this is such a huge monumental deal and such a landmark moment that although the legal fees will be very, very high, it's still not going to be a deterrent to either side. And that's another reason why we will be in litigation within the next few days.
Yeah, I want to pull up this tweet again, because they're saying that they're committed to closing the transaction. I mean, is that a smart move from Twitter to move on in a deal with someone who it doesn't quite look like they're fully committed to taking over?
Well, it's a great question, because this has ultimately been the nightmare that keeps on giving, right? They're trying to enforce a deal with a person that has been almost from day one totally unreliable. He pegged this to a stock deal that included, it was at $54.20 a share, and 420 actually is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek number, because that's something that he uses as code for marijuana use. He whipsawed them by saying he was going to be on the board, and then he backed out. And then he said he wanted to get additional information to do the deal, and now he's backed out. So I think you raise an interesting point. Twitter's in a bad position, because they're trying to enforce a deal with someone who has really demonstrated himself to be pretty unreliable. The problem is that they have a fiduciary duty to the shareholders to enforce this deal. And I think Elon Musk is going to have a hard time saying that the company is withholding information from him, because he waived what the so-called due diligence process. That was a very risky move on his part. I think he'll live to regret that.
Much of this playing out on Twitter itself, which is kind of hilarious. How do you foresee the evidence being presented in court? You know, are those tweets going to be brought in?
I think they will, and I think that Elon Musk is going to have a difficult time portraying himself with a lot of credibility. On the one hand, he said that he wanted to acquire the company because he wanted to turn it into a landmark First Amendment platform for freedom of speech. Well, the presence of bots really isn't relevant for that, and he can remove bots anyway. And the fact that he waived the right to get information and due diligence on the one hand, and then turn around and say, well, gee, I asked for this information, but they never gave it to me, is going to really reflect that he will have an uphill battle in litigation. And the other thing is, there are some reports that this litigation will be very extensive. Keep in mind, the Delaware Chancery Court is really the nation's specialist for corporate litigation. So this case will not take years. This is going to move a little bit more quickly. So I think in terms of the difficulty of the uphill battle and the speed with which it's going to happen, I predict that there's going to be some surprises ahead.
When you say that this is going to be an uphill battle, does that mean a big payout for Twitter, or does that mean a new owner?
Well, I don't think that it's difficult to envision a new owner right now because they do have a big hurdle in terms of enforcing what's called specific performance. But I think what does lie ahead is that Musk will probably end up ultimately facing, in general, two kinds of assertions in the case. One is for so-called specific performance of the deal, to enforce the deal and compel that. But secondly, in the alternative, they're gonna sue for the $44 billion. They're going to sue for the cash as well as any other kind of damages that the company has sustained. Think about the market cap. I mean, this thing is going down after hours. It's been a debacle. It's been an embarrassment. So there are some really viable claims here. Elon Musk, I think, is going to understand in the coming days that this case is going to be a lot more serious than he anticipated.
And not to mention that Twitter is already having some issues of its own, laying off 30% of its talent acquisition staff. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes as well. Seth, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. We'll keep everyone updated as this continues to develop.
You bet.